Hello, and welcome to this module where we'll be talking about how to run for Bay Section Office, prepared by your 2023-2024 Bay Section Officer team, and presented by me, Anshul Singh, who is the current Bay Section President. In this presentation, we'll be going over what is Bay Section Office, why you should run for it, how to run for it, and then finally a recap of everything we talked about. So first, what is Bay Section Office? There are 4 levels of leadership in FBLA. The first is chapter FBLA, where you're working with things inside your chapter. So everything that is specific to your high school. This is what the chapter team is essentially working on. Above that is Bay Section FBLA. Bay Section FBLA is what we're talking about in this video primarily. It is the Bay Section team. There are multiple sections in California, each assigned a geographic region, and all the high schools in that region are one section. So we are the Bay Section, so a lot of high schools in the Bay Area in California, and we do things like the Bay Section Leadership Conference and our Oat Day. Above that is California FBLA. In California FBLA, if you were an officer, you would be planning things that are statewide. For example, the State Leadership Conference and also the Leadership Development Institute. And then finally is National FBLA, the highest level, where you would be planning things on a national level, like the National Leadership Conference and other nationwide events. So what do we do? There are 3 main categories of things we do. The first is section events, the first of which is Oat Day, which happens earlier in the year, and the Bay Section Leadership Conference, which happens in January, generally early February. At Oat Day, we are essentially training all the officers of the chapters in what is new to FBLA this year, what are some updates, but then also how to be good leaders. The Bay Section Leadership Conference, more of you may be familiar with. That is our general competitive conference where you compete in your event and you qualify for states. As a Bay Section officer, you would be in charge of planning both. Then there is the Section POW. Section POW is essentially a list of goals and targets that the team wants to reach. It's a list of activities, essentially, that we want to do. This year, we have 3 different committees. We have the Competitive Resource Competition Resources / Competitive Resource Committee. We have the Public Relations Committee, and then we have the Outreach Committee. Each of these is doing a different thing. Competitive Resources is providing resources to members to help them in competition. Public Relations is in charge of a lot of our social media and growing the Bay Section branding. And then finally, Outreach is in charge of reaching out to more schools and growing the number of chapters and also helping existing chapters. Now, these are not the same year to year. Each team will decide on a new section POW, but it's one of the biggest things we do. Is decide on the section POW and then complete it. Then there are some other things that we do. We have the Bay Breeze, which is our newsletter, which is released semi-regularly containing updates. And then finally, officer elections, because we are in charge of electing the officers for next year. Speaking of which, what are the positions in Bay Section FBLA? There is at the top the president, who leads the team, gives addresses, and serves as the state vice president as well. So if you are elected to Bay Section president or any section president in California, you will be also serving as a state vice president representing your section. Then we have the VP of Outreach. This is the person who works with individual chapters, connects the Bay Section team essentially to the different officer teams, and helps in the creation of new chapters. There's the VP of Activities, which is in charge of the various activities related to the Bay Section and leads with the president the section events. There's the Secretary Treasurer, who takes meeting minutes and keeps track of the budget. There is Public Relations Officer, who is in charge of graphic design, including the Bay Section social media, the Bay Breeze, the website, and any other promotional material. There's the Parliamentarian, who helps run meetings. And then another person you may see on the Bay Section team is our ex officio. The ex officio is not an elected position. This is simply when a student from the Bay Section is elected to a higher level, for example, is a state officer, and then also is automatically serving on the lower level. So for example, right now, we have our state secretary is also an ex officio for the Bay Section, but it is not an elected position. This is not something you run for. Another interesting position is parliamentarian because it is not elected. Instead, the parliamentarian is chosen based on who scores highest on the test. So you're not elected to parliamentarian. If you want to be You don't have to fill out the application. If you want to be parliamentarian, then just take Parley, the Parley Pro event, and then make sure you do well on the test. But an important thing here is that while we do have different positions, we really are all one team. We all work with each other. We all divide up the tasks between ourselves. So if you're secretary treasurer, you're not just taking meeting minutes. If you're a parliamentarian, you're not just running a parliamentary procedure, or you're not just, running the meetings. There's a lot of things that you do. So don't feel locked in. Really, the position you run for is just based on your strengths and what are the minimum responsibilities that you think you can do, because you will be doing things on top of that. So moving on to why Bay Section Office. The first reason to run is leadership. You're in FBLA after all, so you're probably looking for good leadership positions. It's a great opportunity to gain experience in leadership, and it's a stepping stone to even higher offices. So for example, if you want to run eventually for the state team, it's a good idea to serve on your Bay Section team first to get an idea of that. The next is an impact. You can help grow new chapters. You can help aid existing chapters. You have a larger impact than you would on the chapter team, for example. You have more responsibility. You will have to attend events, and those are required of you, and you essentially sign an agreement saying that you will. But you also have more power and influence in those events, which means you can make them better and help more people. You also are essentially giving back to your section, which is a really nice thing. Preparation. So running for Bay Section office and serving as a Bay Section officer or a state officer, or really any officer position in FBLA, gives you a lot of experience. The Bay Section team specifically, and any level higher than chapter, offers a lot more formality and is more professional and more like the real business world based on my own experience. You have real meetings, you have agendas, you have uniforms, and employers and colleges know that, and they'll see that on your resume, which you should include it on the resume. It's a great resume activity. And essentially, people will know that you are ready for the future, and you will also be prepared for it. And then finally, recognition. You've done a lot of work, and if you've run for Bay Section office, you put a lot of work into that too. So Bay Section officers are visible at section events and otherwise as well. All the work you've done to get to that point, and also the work you do as a Bay Section officer, is recognized because you're in essentially the limelight. So it's a great way to get recognition for all your hard work and your impact at FBLA. So how to run for office. So there are multiple steps to running to office, and we'll just go over a chronology of them. The first is to fill out the application, which is due around mid-December. Information and links will be sent out, so you should be making sure to follow the state Instagram, which currently is at CAFBLA, and also the section Instagram, which for the Bay Section is currently at Bay Section FBLA, all lowercase. I believe that is here. So we're on filling the application. Those are the two Instagrams right now, but these may change. For the 2023-2024 year, the applications have already been released. Generally, they are released later in first semester. So keep an eye out for that. They're available generally on the state website. But if you have any difficulty finding them, make sure you're talking to your chapter advisor or chapter president. In this application, you're going to have multiple parts. You're going to have to fill in some personal information like your name, address, and also your CTE pathway. You do need to take a CTE course to be an officer, and those courses differ from school to school. You need a candidate statement, which is essentially why do you want the job and why are you qualified. It's a long response question. I wouldn't call it an essay, but it is like a longer response, and you want to put some thought into it. There is some chapter information, so your advisor will be an extremely important person for you throughout this entire process. Advisors have to attend board meetings, they have to chaperone you, and they're very much involved, especially at the section level. They're less so involved at the state and national level, so you might want to check with your advisor on, first of all, are they willing to commit? And second of all, how much are they willing to commit? And then finally, there is the primary advisor and principal certification. These are essentially people attesting to your ability, and also if they need to do some work. Generally, the principal doesn't have much of a commitment at all, but these are essentially people attesting to you and saying that if they need to commit, they will. These are the eligibility guidelines for who can be your advisor, but generally it's going to be your local chapter advisor or whoever's the advisor at your high school. And then there are also some additional forms, which you can see here. This is kind of an overview of everything that you need to include on the application. Keep in mind, these do change year to year from time to time. So you want to make sure that you're checking the most recent application, the one for your year, and making sure you're filling out everything there. But this is a good baseline to go off of. Some additional things you need are a resume, your school transcript, where you're highlighting the CTE courses you took, your district chaperone policy. This is specific to your high school, so you want to ask your chapter advisor or other staff in your school for this form, and the privacy consent form, which you need a parent signature and approval. And then you can see there, based on what section you're applying to and what position you're applying to, you may need to email it to the base section director, for instance, which is Mr. Logie, or the student state officer coordinator, Dr. Looker. So after all the applications are submitted, the base section team will go over them along with the admin at the section and state level. And then once we decide on a certain number of candidates, we will interview them. The base section team will conduct an interview at one of the base section board meetings. These generally take place in January, and they are held at one of the local high schools. Generally Homestead or Limerick, though that will probably change based on where a majority of candidates are hailing from. In this interview, we're going to ask you some questions about why are you running for office, what would you do in office, and then how do you react to situations? And really, we're trying to understand more about you and your leadership style, and if we think you're a good fit for the position. You do need to complete this interview and get approval to run for office. But once you complete this interview does not decide if you're an officer. This simply decides if you're eligible to run as an officer. It's essentially like a background check to make sure this is a qualified candidate. Then we have the campaign. This is during the morning and afternoon of base section leadership conference, which is held in February. So during this campaign, you will be given a booth at the base section conference, and you will have a trifold. Depending on the rules, you can have a certain amount of goodies to distribute, and you're essentially campaigning to the students. If you need to leave your booth at any time, it is recommended that you have someone from your chapter stand in for you, and they can campaign on your behalf. But a lot of the time at base section will be spent at your booth campaigning, talking to other students about what you're going to do for them, what you bring to the base section, and yeah, it's like a normal campaign. After that, which is generally after the testing session of base section, so once all the testing is over, there is a caucus that is held. So each school sends a number of delegates that actually vote on who will be the officers for next year. Delegates will ask candidates questions at the caucus, and each candidate gets a certain amount of time to respond to those questions. So it's a bit of an impromptu thing where you're responding to questions that are asked of you, and you have a certain amount of time to do so. After a couple of rounds of those questions, a vote is held where all the delegates vote on who they want to vote for. And then the results are announced later at selection. So this is at the base section leadership conference awards ceremony generally. Again, the campaign, caucus, and selection are all on the same day. Keep this in mind. Just a chapter position. Some people might look for a state or a national officer position, but the section position is a nice middle ground, in my opinion, that can serve either as a stepping stone or a culmination of a lot of experience in FBLA. Then you want to talk to your advisor. Your advisor, again, is an extremely integral part, and to run and be an officer, you need the backing of your advisor. If your advisor perhaps doesn't want to commit as much, you may want to consider a different position, either sticking to the chapter level or moving up higher to the state or national level, for instance. But your advisor is still going to need to play an important role. So make sure that you're having a healthy discussion with them and confirming that they are, yes, willing to support you, and they know all the commitments that they would need to make. The third step is to keep up to date. I recommend following the FBLA socials, so those we talked about earlier in the video, because if you follow those, then you will know when, for example, officer applications are released, or generally when the base section conference is going to be. After you've done that, you want to complete the steps to run for office, the ones we talked about. So you want to fill the application out, you want to complete the interview, and then you're going to hopefully pass the interview and then campaign, caucus, and be selected as an officer. And then finally, the fifth step is serve your section. You've won this amazing position, and I know that you're going to have a great impact. So serve your section with pride. Thank Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, talk to your chapter president or your local chapter advisor. You can also email any of the officers on the base section team or state team. Our emails are available at cafbla.org. And our section advisor for the base section is Mr. Logie, whose email is glogie@cafbla.org. Thank you for watching this presentation and good luck with your campaign. Thank you.